Hi, I'm Bill Baker. I'm here today to share a little bit about my past in the military and a little bit about my current and future in my occupation as a human resource executive. I was in the Navy. I was drafted into the Navy. I was actually drafted, period. That's the way it goes when you start out with an active draft program in the country in which you, or the area in which you exist. But I was drafted after 2 years of college, and the fact that I was adamant about graduating from college without a large debt over my head. And so I had spent everything that I had saved up to that point in time on college education, and I needed to get out and replenish my funds so that I could continue to be independent from the banks in terms of my education. So I was drafted in January of 1962. Actually, that's when I went into the Navy. I was drafted in October of 1961, and actually became active in April of 1962. It's kind of an interesting time because that was the year in which the SEAL teams in the Navy were being organized and deployed, which was a new elite group of military operatives. And so there was a real interest in becoming part of that from the general public. And I was, surprisingly enough, I was not going in to become a SEAL. I was going in to become a Navy pilot. And I had been accepted through the recruiting depot in my hometown as being a valid or viable candidate for flight school. Unfortunately, shortly after I was drafted and became active in the Navy, I had to go through a series of both basic battery testing, which means, are you able to tie your shoes with both hands, and real heavy duty kind of stuff. Really, I'm being facetious, but there is a very broad basic battery of tests that you take to determine your readiness for military duty. Early on, I was also tested for eyes, because eyes, it seems to be the biggest knockout factor in terms of flight training. And for the first time in my life, I was 22 years old, I became conscious of the fact that I did have some color perception deficiencies, which pulled the flight school out of my reach. And so there I was. I felt that I had been recruited, I'd been promised, and then it had been taken away from me. So I was just ready to Hubert Humphrey was my senator, and I was writing him a letter to see if there was any way for me to get out of this situation, and there wasn't. But they didn't have a lot of escape routes once they had you by the arm and were pulling you in a particular direction. So, but surprisingly enough, at that point in time, this is the first time that underwater demolition, or frog men, or whatever, women, or whatever you wanted to call them, were being recruited. Candidates for that were being recruited out of the Navy training centers in the Great Lakes here in this area, and in Little Creek, Virginia, and on the west or east coast. And so I raised my hand again, and I went back to the recruiting depot and asked, is there a chance that I could qualify for one of those positions if I passed all of your requirements? And they agreed with me that I should take a shot at it, which I did. And lo and behold, I became a trainee in underwater demolition, or frogman training in the Navy. It was a fairly long program. It was about 30-some weeks of training before you could, if you could retain your position in that training during that period of time, you could become a frogman or an underwater demolition person after 36 weeks, I believe it was. a very, very intense program. In fact, it was where I really kind of came to grips with myself, where I was tested along with 117 other men. We didn't have any women that were in that training program at that particular point in time. And I was one of 32 graduates of 117 people. Very high knockout factor because of the intensity of the training and the fact that you had to accept an awful lot of stuff that you would have never accepted under any other circumstances. But there was always that carrot out there in terms of the people that were our trainers, that were already frogmen, underwater demolition specialists, that continued to push us on. And I think we had a lot of camaraderie in our 30-some recruits out of the Naval Training Centers, because we really pulled each other together to try to keep everybody in the program to its conclusion. The wonderful experience, very intelligent group for the most part because of all the screening that had taken place to get them where they were. They were very dedicated, excited to be part of something that was so different. In fact, one of the things they told us, if you graduate from this program, you'll be one in millions, 3-4 million people that ever came through this program and made it. And that was hypothetical, and of course, not that many people ever went through the program, and that was kind of what they were taunting us with in terms of our completing the training. This is one of and during this training was one of the situations in which I became most conscious of myself. I was 22 years old, I had 2 years of college. I was from a small town in Minnesota, 760 people, I believe, something like that. I really hadn't experienced much of a life up at that point in time, other than Maple Lake, Minnesota. And so all of a sudden, I'm finding out that there's things that are going on inside of me, inside of my head, inside of my physical body that I had never tested before. And so this gave me an opportunity to reach out and see what I really was made of. And I was surprised. There were some things that I ran 3 marathons during that training. I swam, what was it, 12 miles, I think it was one of the defining requirements to make it into the teams. And I made some great friends, great friends, several of which I'm still in touch with today. In fact, we've just, one of our kind of lead yeoman type training I can't think of the word specifically, but there were guys by the name of Nick Nicholson, and he and 4 other people, including myself, we were chosen by the Gemini Space Program, NASA, to do all the capsule recovery training for the Pacific Ocean. Because at that particular point in time, capsules were coming in on parachutes, and somebody had to be there to make sure that we didn't ground astronauts by the dozens during the course of that training. And we got a chance to meet some other great people as a result of that. So I didn't have a choice in terms of whether or not I was going to be in the military, because somebody else made that choice for me. I wanted to be with debt when I graduated from college, and I had to take a quarter off in order to get some more money I was from a I have 4 siblings, and we were pretty much lower middle class people, and therefore my dad came to me early on before I graduated high school and says, Bill, I know that you want to go to college, and I don't have the money to support that at this particular point in time, so you're going to have to think about how you can make some money and develop a slush fund that can help you get through the college that you choose to pursue, which, all things considered, worked out for me. I can't even get into all the skills that we had critical skills that we had to develop in order to be effective in our roles as frogmen, underwater demolition. And of all to this day, I scare the dickens out of people that were my teammates to know that I was colorblind. I had some color perceptions that I was helping set explosives, up to 15 tons of plastic explosives in one case, and I was in charge of the project. But no one knew. I passed the color test because during the induction physical, they did a whole wall in red with a projector, and they said, "What color do you see?" I said, "I can't see anything but red." The whole wall is red. And then they just kind of fluffed over that. So that was considered not to be a knockout factor, apparently. Obviously, when you go through something like that, you're always pushing the envelope in terms of doing things that you shouldn't have done under any circumstances, on leave or when you had time off or whatever the case may be. But it was fun, and we were conscious enough and intelligent enough to know that there were some things that you just didn't do. You didn't jump off tall buildings or bridges without parachutes and things like that. But we did a lot of things that tested the outer limits of our physical and psychological abilities. What does Veterans Day mean to me? I could get a tear in my eye here because it means everything. And it means that I had choices that no other individual had to decide how they were going to live the rest of their lives and what they were capable of doing. And I experienced a lot of things that I would have never accomplished or experienced under any other conditions. So I was excited about that. It was fun. I love locking out of submarines. I mean, some people that are claustrophobic would find it very disturbing to get into a chamber in a submarine at 200 feet under the ocean and lock out onto the deck, get in a submersible, and go in and do a training exercise to attack a determined objective somewhere on the beach. So we didn't have enough, in the 30-some weeks that we went through underwater demolition training wasn't enough. I had the choice, another thing, because I liked exercise, I liked challenges and so forth. I was chosen by Navy San Diego to represent the military in the World Military Games in Bergen, Norway. There were 3 of us that were chosen for that assignment, and then of course more training and all the things that were necessary to compete with people from around the world. But there were things that were more exciting to me because I was picking the fruit off the tree at that particular point in time, and I thought parachuting would be a real kick. So I said, I think I'll pass on the World Games. We'll let the other 2 guys that were chosen to represent it. They represented us very well, by the way. And I went off to do other things. And parachuting was the first thing that I did. It was kind of funny because my first parachute jump, I was in a World War II plane, and I wished I had the designation of what it was, because some of you folks would probably recognize what that plane looks like. But our plane was loaded too heavily, and we went down the runway, and we went down the runway, and all of a sudden there wasn't any runway, and we were in the mud at the end of the runway, and buried the plane at the end of the and never did get off the ground on that particular flight opportunity. But I eventually went through that. Of course, I had just come out of 36 weeks of intense training, and most of the people in my parachute class that were coming out of the ranks of the Army and the Air Force and etc., and hadn't had the physical training that I had had. And the instructors at Fort Benning, Georgia, used to use us as examples of how much someone can do if they really put their mind to it. And so I was doing 50 push-ups every time I turned around, because I had done something that caught the attention of the instructors. after I got out through all this training activity, I was during the next 4 years, I was assigned to 3 war deployments in Vietnam, 6 months, and each of them 6 months in duration. And during that period of time, we were always training. And every opportunity we had, we were doing some kind of a training exercise. Unfortunately, most of that training was in the water, and unfortunately, I lost 8 teammates to diving accidents during that period of time. All embolisms, and never recovered from them. And we lost 2 in combat, only 2 in combat. Because most of our activities were done in a clandestine, dark, nighttime environment. And so we weren't easy targets. And we were always gocked up with camouflage paints and appropriate kinds of dresses and night vision goggles and all that stuff. I could go on and on. I mean, my life changed. I wasn't the same person after I got out of all this training that I was when I went into it. Because I also all of a sudden discovered that there's so much more to a human being than just what you know at 22 years of age and haven't had a lot of practical experience. And so I took that experience and I wanted to duplicate it for others to some degree, never to the degree that I had to go through, because I was being trained by people that were very tenured in those skill bases. But so what I'd like to conclude with today is that what are you doing to discover yourself and your potential? I mean, it's just a question I ask you to ask of yourself. Is it something that will allow you to discover a life that's greater or better or whatever, or maybe even a life that doesn't fit you? Maybe it's a matter of how far you can go or how far you want to go. I think most of the people that I associated with had the attitude that don't quit, don't give up. If you accept an assignment, you finish that assignment. And I think most of the people that got through the training with me were people that came to the conclusion that unless I can't function anymore to be an active part of the training, then it's time for me to get out, because there's nothing more for me to do that's appropriate. We were very careful about doing things that were just extraordinarily dangerous. And we would always have somebody jump in if somebody was not handling explosives, particularly with the authority that they demanded, and get them away before they hurt themselves. These aren't 4th of July firecrackers. These are big guys. So I challenge you to ask yourself the question, are you where you want to be? Are you where you think you can be? What can you do to test your ability to go beyond where you're at? There's people that are available to help you answer those questions if you don't have any answers for them. One of the things that I dislike most about America is that we don't make the commitments that allow us to express and get to know ourselves as deeply and intimately as the opportunities present themselves. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. I hope that you have rich and full and exciting lives as I have had. And if you have any questions of me, here I am.